Welcome to the RD2BE podcast. Each week we sit down with a different registered dietitian nutritionist to showcase the diversity of opportunity in the dietetics profession. Our aim is to dismantle the notion that there is a traditional career path. I'm Carl Barnes, the registered dietitian behind the scenes of RD2BE.
And I am Jenna Warnock, the RD2BE host. Our RD guests share their stories, career paths, and advice to help students like us succeed in the profession. Welcome back to another week of the RD2BE podcast. I'm your host, Jenna, and this week we are yet again super excited to sit down with an incredibly influential dietitian that truly, with the goal of this podcast, is to show that you can really make the dietetics profession your own. And so this week we're sitting down with Dr. Shelby Yaceczko. She's an advanced practice dietitian in a clinical nutrition role, as well as an assistant clinical professor of a graduate nutrition program, as well as the founder and CEO of FU Cancer, which is a cancer wellness company. So she's worn many hats, which is a common thing we see with very successful dietitians. And we're super excited to sit down, learn more about her path, and ways that we as aspiring RDs can truly make the most of this profession. So Dr. Yaceczko, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to being here and contributing to this podcast. I think it's awesome you all do this.
Yeah, no, and I'm super excited too to just have awesome guests like you. And so we tend to like to first open the floor just so that people kind of get an idea of who the guest is and what led them to where they are. But what inspired you to pursue your career in dietetics?
Yeah, I think I probably have a little bit of a different answer than maybe some of your other guests or people you've talked to, but I feel like nutrition kind of fell on my lap, to be honest, and it wasn't something I was really intentionally going into. I was actually I went to high school as a aspiring professional dancer in Ohio, and then I moved out to Los Angeles, California to continue my dance career. And I needed to essentially have some type of like academic degree routed with my career goals as part of my parents' blessing to move out to California, just not for dance. So I figured nutrition sounds easy. It sounds something everyone eats food. I love food. Food means something to everyone. I'll just like tag this degree on to my dance degree. And I ended up really, really falling in love with the sport nutrition side of things. And I loved, the exercise component as being a aspiring professional dancer at that time. And so I ended up moving into kind of the dietetics and food service type of degree at California State University in Long Beach. And I was also dual majoring at that time in dance. So I was like dancing all the time and I was super tired and trying to get all my classes in and learn about food and nutrition. And then the more I went through the degree, the more I really loved it. And I really at that time thought I'd be really into kind of the athletics world and teaching people about food and fuel and nutrition in the sport world. And then I ended up full-fledging turning other ways many years later and going into clinical. So it's been fun to see kind of the journey that you can get through dietetics and the things that inspire you along the way. I think you'll be really surprised sometimes.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you kept an open mind and still like paired with dance something. You still kind of pursued a passion of yours alongside what you enjoyed at the very beginning. And I'm glad that you also described how you transitioned and kind of pivoted to clinical. And so and that also ties to what we mentioned with your introduction, how you're an advanced practice dietitian, which kind of has that RDN-AP credential. And so that's something that you can maybe see on like people's LinkedIn profiles or like just we've been starting to see a little bit more in those clinical settings. So can you describe the significance of that RDN-AP, what it means for someone to have that, how you kind of fell into that credential and how that's like could potentially set yourselves apart for different career opportunities?
Yeah, for sure. And I think as our profession in the profession of dietetics and nutrition really kind of increases to some degree or really expands out, you'll see some new terminology starts getting coined. So we've seen a lot of these like specialty credentials start getting developed. There's a new one coming out with CDR and digestive health, which is really exciting. That just got released this year and announced. The advanced level practice one in clinical nutrition. the AP RD credential came out a couple of years ago and is, now more and more people are starting to sit for this credential. So I think it's just neat to see how the profession evolves, and then you see where people's like niches and areas for career laddering start coming in. But really what they define as advanced level practice for nutrition and dietetics in the clinical setting. This is really listed straight on like the Commission on Dietetics registration website as well, if you want to go back and look at how it's defined. But advanced clinical nutrition practice is really the provision of direct nutrition care, whether it be to individuals or to groups, in the provision of indirect nutrition care through whether it's management or leadership, education, quality improvement, process improvement, research, that's really linking back to clinical nutrition. So when I think of kind of advanced level practice in the clinical world, it's really those dietitians that have the ability to kind of independently and mostly solely manage clients and patients using current evidence, current research practices, leading interdisciplinary healthcare teams, really being that point person for nutrition expertise, directing initiatives, whether it be related to quality improvement projects, research, designing, developing protocols, evaluating systems. So not only just direct, client to patient care, but also at a systems level. How do they assess and evaluate if those healthcare systems or if those nutrition care systems in place are working? Being able to modify and contribute to protocols, whether that's nutrition policy, advocacy, policies at institutions or facilities. So really being that kind of key leader. So you think of an advanced level person or advanced practice level dietitian in the clinical world, they really have knowledge and skills required to be autonomous in practice, apply the nutrition care process and the different kind of pathways, if you will, from start to finish at really an optimal level so we get successful outcomes, whether that be for a system, again, or more like an individual person that they're working with.
Oh, awesome. And when it came to your specific career path, what made you decide to pursue that RDN-AP?
Yeah, I think I just heard about it and I said, I'll take the test. And I didn't know anything about it. I think like the second or third cohort that took it. So I think it was still so new that I didn't really know. And I just thought it sounded cool. So I didn't think I had a lot of intention behind it, which I don't always recommend doing, to be honest. But I think how it's like impacted my career now is I've got recognition as being, an advanced level practice provider as a dietitian in some of the roles that I sit on, and I've been able to be involved in some of like the AP work through CDR and being seen as kind of like an advanced level clinical nutrition practice provider, which is great. So just being recognized, I think, in the profession at that level. I think each institution and facility you work at sees credentials a little bit differently. I worked at a fantastic job through Sodexo, who really recognizes the AP and things like doctoral degrees. And they have like really excellent like career laddering opportunities before. And that was when I first got my AP, which I think partly motivated me. And then now I work in a health system that they don't recognize specialty credentials or advanced degrees. So it's less meaningful for my employment at this time, but that doesn't mean that every job it's like that. And there are some jobs that I think really value the specialty credentials and value like higher education. So kind of boils back to what you're looking for. And if you're trying to sit for the degree for more of like a financial perspective or more for personal, I think for me, it's just really reinforces like my professional practice and some of the things that I look to do in the clinical nutrition world to the public, and also for myself. So
Absolutely. And I think it definitely has that balance. And you described it perfectly how you get that higher degree and higher level of not just recognition, because again, that's context dependent on the job that you're in and the environment that you're in, but how you're still able to glean benefit from it, just depending on the situation that you're in, what your goals are, your motivations. And from what it seems like, also with you holding a doctorate or a doctor of clinical nutrition, definitely honing in on those clinical nutrition skills. And so the DCN, or Doctor of Clinical Nutrition, is another popular degree or just popular credential that we're starting to see pop up even more. And I've had some past episodes going over the new advanced practice doctoral standards with Ascend, and like kind of where the DCN falls into that, and how you're yes, we have the master's degree requirement now. Now people are speculating and talking about these like doctoral degrees happening in nutrition. And we spoke to Dr. Rayanne Abusaba, like the director of Ascend, executive director of Ascend, and she talked about how the requirement switching to a doctorate is definitely not at any point anytime soon. It's predominantly just kind of expanding those opportunities and the role that a dietitian can hold, or a role that nutrition can hold in a clinical setting. But still, I'm very happy to have someone who holds a DCN to kind of possibly share their insights and what your experience has been with having a doctorate in clinical nutrition. And so first, what motivated you to pursue the DCN?
Yeah, my master's degree is in exercise physiology. So kind of going back to like loving athletes, loving the sport world. So I got a master's degree after my bachelor's and going through a dietetic internship. And I went back and did exercise physiology. So I felt like, as much as I love the exercise world, I felt like I wasn't great at what I was doing clinically at that time. And I started doing some like clinical per diem work. And I felt like I was really strong in kind of the sport nutrition realm and my knowledge at that point. But I felt like as I was working in some of my kind of side jobs at that time, clinically, I felt like I was missing something. I was like, I feel like there's more I need to know to really be here and know what I'm doing for patient care. So when I'd see patients, I would sometimes just question myself a lot, or feel like I really didn't quite know what I was doing, especially when I started working at some of the more like acute level hospitals. I just felt really kind of lost. And then I reviewed research and I was like, I don't even really know how to review this research that well. I don't really understand what I'm doing. And I'd love to learn how to understand research and synthesize it a little bit better. Research was never really my main focus to get a doctorate, which is partly why I got a DCN, and I'll kind of describe the difference in a minute. But um, for me, I think at that point, I've always been somebody who I really want to understand what I'm doing, especially if it impacts human beings. And so I felt like there was more for me at the place of graduating with a master's degree that was not in like a clinical nutrition degree. And I needed to learn more so I could better support the people I'm touching each day, but also feel like more confident in my own practice and my scope. And I was starting to hear about like dietitians doing really cool things at this point. I mean, this was, gosh, like 7 years ago, 8 years ago. And I was like, oh, there's dietitians out there who are placing feeding tubes and looking at CT scans and doing all this really cool like body comp work. And I started seeing a lot of really, awesome research of like increasing scope of practice in dietitians at higher levels. And I was like, I need to go back to the basics and learn more just about like fundamentals of clinical, fundamentals of, how can I understand research and synthesis and all of this good stuff and just be a better practitioner. So started looking at doctoral programs. And at the time I started my program, which was about 7 years ago, there was really only a couple of programs at that time. And it's like crazy to see how many have popped up in the last couple of years. But I ended up choosing to go to Rutgers University, which had a really phenomenal program. And I'm so grateful for my experience there. And, I weighed a couple of different factors. I thought about how long is this going to take me? What's my time commitment going to look like with doing a doctorate while I'm working full time and have like side jobs, and I'm a new practitioner, looking at the different programs and like kind of what they're offering, what their niches are, who I'm going to be working with, and really identifying like what I'm trying to get out of it.
No, awesome. And when it came to like the pros and cons of your experience, maybe more so if someone's considering pursuing a DCN, just things that you think if someone's interested in looking into those types of programs, things that they should consider, or things you maybe wish, or not necessarily wish you knew, but things that would have been helpful to possibly know while looking into different DCN programs or into a DCN.
For sure. I mean, I think it's important to understand like the why. Like if a PhD and a DCN, they are different degrees. And I think there's also, one of the cons, I would say to some degree, can be the stigma that you get of like not doing a PhD for certain jobs or certain programs, or even like certain journals, right? And so sometimes there's the stigma that a doctoral degree can be perceived in some situations, which, I've experienced myself as like less than a PhD. And it's not necessarily less than by any means, in my opinion. I think it's different. So really the main difference between a PhD and a doctorate really ultimately lies in like the focus of the program, like what the student's experience is and what the focus is while they're going through the program. PhD is really a heavily focused research oriented type of program, very academic degree in nature, very, traditional, by the book to some level. Really focusing on a lot of like original research and contributing knowledge and research expertise throughout that program into a specific field, right? So if you're getting like a PhD and in X, you're really going to be focusing on your specific field and really looking, analyzing, synthesizing research in that, and also conducting your own research in that area. Really, a doctorate, on the other hand, is a bit broader, encompassing really both a combination, I'd say, of like the academia side of things, but also the professional degree and the applied part of it in the field that you're looking at in the doctoral degree. So like with DCN, it's a doctorate of clinical nutrition. So really my experience was really applying my professional setting and my clinical expertise into kind of the academic setting as well, but also building up some of my professional abilities in the real world, like in practice. So really the doctorate, many of which doctoral programs are really going to be focused on applying knowledge to these like real world problems in professional practice experience. So a lot of what we did was like bringing case studies from our day jobs into our coursework and really look at those and build on those and do literature reviews based on our case studies and how we can improve our practice experience. And a lot of the writing I did was around like case studies or different conditions that I'm working with in practice. So just a bit different on some of the research focuses as well. The program I went to was incredible for the fact that I had, amazing faculty, great advisors, met a lot of people that I still kind of connect with now, or I've made friends with, which is really fun, like all across the country. But also, that also comes at a cost, right? A doctorate's expensive, whether you do a DCN or a PhD. So I think really understanding like what the tuition fees are going to look like and what your plan is for paying those tuition fees, and if you need to get financial support, especially if you are working and you have a job, you may not qualify for any financial support, which is the case I did. I wasn't able to get any kind of financial support throughout the program. And so that was very important to me as somebody who funds myself, like trying to identify like how am I going to pay each semester for tuition, and like what is my 6-year plan to be able to get through this and not have to drop out. And also just identifying, what your goal is with the use of that credential once you get it. If your expectation is that you're just going to get like a huge raise or a whole new job, I think just really staying realistic and understanding like what your employer recognizes, and seeing if the career ladder is built in for those types of things, or you may not even be practicing as a dietitian by the end, and you may have a completely different title because you're trying to advance your career and do things at a higher level that may not be like direct dietitian thought of work at that time. So I think when you're starting to think about, if you want a doctorate, what type of doctorate you want to get, if you want a PhD, it really lies into like, what is your focus? What is your goal with getting the degree? And do you have a realistic plan to get through the degree? Do you have the time? Do you have the money? And do you have the drive to be doing work at night after your day job and doing work on the weekends when you want to go out and relax? So all those things have to be considered.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's good how we've also dived a little bit into, like what drove your motivation to get the RDN-AP and then what drove your decision to get the DCN. And also just to confirm when you were comparing like the DCN to the PhD, using the term like doctorate to PhD, you were using doctorate in the context of doctorate in clinical nutrition.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. And yeah, so I think really kind of focusing on your motivations, your intrinsic, like what you're willing to do, because I know for me, I just finished my first year of my PhD program, and I can absolutely, yeah, you hit the nail on the head. It's very much your eating, sleeping, and breathing research. And again, every PhD program is a little bit different, but it's honestly, and this is why I really love the podcast, is what helped me choose between a DCN and a PhD, because I was very much on that fence. It was to also talking to people and learning and hearing what people's own experiences were. And that's really my goal with these podcasts and wanting to feature more dietitians that have these advanced practice degrees or these doctoral degrees, because one, there's not enough dietitians with these doctoral degrees, and with the demand of the master's degree requirement, we're going to need more dietitians with those terminal degrees in order to teach these aspiring RDs. But also, because there's so many different things that you can do as a dietitian, same thing with those terminal degrees. And I think you again hit the nail on the head as far as knowing your motivations, knowing what drives you, and having those key factors to consider. And so you mentioned how you had, different reasons to pursue that RDN-AP with how it was new and just being like, hey, it sounds cool and let's just see where it takes me. And then having your own unique experience with that. But then with the DCN, it was more so, I really want to enrich my clinical knowledge, clinical experience, really kind of fully wrap my head around it. But kind of diving a little bit deeper, especially with there being so many credentials, so many different letters. I hear the term alphabet soup all the time in the dietetics profession. So just kind of to dive a little bit deeper into those different credentials and those different degrees. Do you have specific examples of how they have shaped your professional growth? Like if someone's wanting to get more insight into, okay, well, I don't want just to add a letter at the end of my name. I want to make sure that exactly to what you said, what am I getting out of it? And so for you with the DCN or the RDN-AP or any other, like degrees that you've held or credentials, how have they helped shape your professional growth and just where you've ended up career-wise?
Yeah, I mean, I think working in healthcare, you can get really lost to some degree, and I think just like as small as dietetics is, it's also there's so many different areas and specialties and things people go into. So I think you can sometimes feel a little bit like lost of all the different groups and things and opportunities and skill sets and things you could or couldn't know. So I think sometimes having the credentials allows you to focus. It allows you to have a feeling or also understand that you have expertise in different areas. So kind of setting you aside rather than like what I call is like a generalist. So registered dietitians are somewhat trained to be like a generalist, to know a little bit about a lot of different things. And then you have the ability to kind of self-specialize depending on your interests. And then advance your knowledge and expertise in things like research by getting advanced level degrees or specializing in certain clinical areas. Like if you really love renal nutrition, you can get the renal credential and work in renal or sport, or, there's a lot of different opportunities for dietitians. So for me, I'm kind of a prove your worth type of person. So I think that's kind of one of my like personal philosophies for myself, is to be able to show my worth. And I think some of the specialty credentials do allow that to some degree of showing people, hey, I'm considered an expert in this, and I'm able to recognize other people that have similar expertise in the field through specialty credentials and degrees. Um, I think there's also specialty credentials do very much open up doors and open up opportunities and open up even things like leadership roles and networking and sitting on different boards. But also just like in the field, there's a lot of jobs where you can't work in critical care unless you hold certain credentials or certain experience, or you can't work at certain dialysis centers without the renal credential, or you can't work in certain sport jobs without having the sport credential, the sport nutrition one. So I think too, it just gives you a little bit more bandwidth of, hey, like let's explore different career opportunities, or work at a facility or institution that may be considered more prestigious or more advanced. And then it never hurts too if there's a salary bump. So a lot of, especially a lot of the larger employers for dietitians do recognize credentials, and they'll even cover your exam if you pass, or they'll give you, a spot bonus or potentially a salary increase. So never hurts to like use the credentials too to help from a financial respect to get back what your knowledge and skills are. Um, I think a lot of people in our profession particularly look for personal and professional fulfillment, and I'm super guilty of this as well, where sometimes we do a lot of things just complimentary. And I think that's hopefully, more and more, I think people are really kind of stepping out there, like some of the other healthcare professions, and really trying to put our value and our worth out there, and make an imprint on the value we provide to the health system and to the public at large, to get compensated appropriately and to do things not just for like passion or interest. But I think credentials also help show, that extra layer of expertise past being like a generalist, especially when you're unfortunately in the space of there's competition with influencers, and there's competition with social media wellness people and people who don't have a registered dietitian credential. So I think those things only help like further support like the expertise that registered dietitian nutritionists have, and also the professional recognitions among the team and among different disciplines, rather than just being a nutritionist. You're certified and registered as a dietitian with specialty in sport nutrition. Like that looks very different than somebody who just got like, a personal training certificate that's providing nutrition. So I think it does help delineate roles and responsibilities and just credibility too.
Absolutely. And I really like how you emphasized a common trend that we've seen in dietetics. And I like the phrase that you use, complementary, how it just seems like RDs have been tacked on to certain things and just kind of like swept in there to check the box to say that, oh, we're in the room and that's it, kind of call it a day. But I like how you emphasize the role that these credentials, that these degrees can hold, particularly in how you use it. And again, focusing on that action associated with it. And one thing that when it came to advice that I heard before in the same context is, look at the jobs or roles and positions that you're interested in and see what credentials or degrees they require to see if you are moving in the right direction that you want to pursue. And I think there's power to setting yourself apart with those credentials because of, again, like what it allows you to do and how it can possibly expand your scope and what you can do in your roles. And I like how, kind of shifting back to what you mentioned with us not being so complimentary, us going to more into those leadership roles, to being more of like the drivers of nutrition. We're fighting with these influencers day in and day out. And I truly respect the dietitian social media people because I could never do that. And I'm glad that we have some people in our corners fighting the good fight over there. But still, even with us maybe talking to people in inpatient, outpatient settings, they're still on the social media and things like that. And they're like, oh, what do you think of this? So that'll always be a fight. And I think, yeah, having these credentials or having these niches that we really carve ourselves into help drive us to be those subject matter experts. And kind of diving a bit more into that, shifting into how we can be, the drivers of nutrition and dietetics. You hold a like strong leadership position now in what you do. And I think that's a great example of the current role that you have and how you are showing that registered dietitians are the subject matter experts, especially in a clinical position. So can you describe your leadership role and what you do now, and just kind of a little bit of showing the listeners here how a dietitian can thrive in a leadership position and just what it is that you do?
Yeah, for sure. I hold a couple of different leadership roles right now in 2025. I guess I'll just kind of go over a couple of them just so you have context. So one of them is with a DPG group called the Dietitians in Medical Nutrition Therapy. It's DMNT. And then they have different subgroups. So medical nutrition therapy is such a huge one, you can imagine. So they have different subgroups, and I work closely with DIGID, which is the digestive diseases group, essentially. Digid, and I started the accessory organ work group about 2 years ago and helped kind of relaunch that and get that back off the ground and build up a committee that we could do some projects through that DPG focused on accessory organs, which are like pancreas, liver, your bile ducts, your gallbladder, et cetera. And so I work with a group of professionals from across the country who are well-recognized experts in these organs as well. The pancreas is my favorite. I love the pancreas. I could talk about it all day. And we do a lot of education, project work. We've done webinars. We just developed a guide for the pancreas that will be coming out as a resource through the DPG and the Academy. So it's just fun to be able to do like education with other professionals in that particular group. And then I sit on the board for dietitians and nutrition support, which is otherwise called DNS. I've held a lot of various leadership roles with them over the last various years, including like nominating committee. I've been the director of professional education and product development, and I'm currently the editor for the Support Line Journal, which is a peer-reviewed journal for nutrition support publications, if you've ever seen that. And then one of my main roles is incoming chair, which I start in 2 days officially with the Commission on Dietetic Registration, which is CDR, whose vision is really to protect and promote the health of the public by supporting practitioner competencies, quality practice, learning activities, and career advancement for the nutrition and dietetics profession. And I sit on a lot of different committees with the Commission on Dietetic Registration and task forces, and involved in a lot of the projects and like the growth that we do through the Commission on Dietetic Registration. And then we collaborate really closely with the Academy of Nutrition as well as Ascend, as you mentioned earlier. So the three of us are working together on various things and at the national level. So that's been a huge eye-opening experience for me to kind of go from like a local level of volunteering, which is where I started in college and where I started early on in my leadership, like a decade ago, and then really like graduate myself up to like the DPD's level where I've done a lot of DPG work. And then now I'm like kind of sitting more at the national level that I'm helping support things that are really impacting our whole profession, which is really cool. So it's been a huge growth and learning experience for myself as a human, but also as myself from a professional and career standpoint.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I absolutely love hearing how people are so involved within the Academy, CDR, and Ascend because they really do make the dietitian world go round. And while yes, we're in a very transitionary, transformative phase, I think now more than ever, it's really important to be involved, to really be at the forefront of what these changes are and kind of having our voices heard during this really amazing transformative time for dietitians. And when it comes to the leadership roles that you've held within like the dietetics profession, can you kind of describe like what you mentioned, like lots of growth and lots of development from being in these roles? So when it came to the skills that were kind of accompanied in this process, were there certain skills that you not necessarily needed, but that you wanted or would recommend having before going into these roles? And then kind of showing your progression of, hey, these were the skills I had going in, these are the skills I learned during, and then kind of, yeah, shaping into who you are now with those skills.
Yeah, I mean, I think you don't know what you don't know is a good way to think about it. Like leadership means different things to different people. There's so many different leadership styles depending on what you need. So like my leadership style changes depending on the organization I'm working with, the group I'm working with, the the goals of the group. So I think it's important to identify first off, like what is your role in this group and what type of leadership style is going to best suit this group when you're looking at, being a leader to some degree. You can very much be a very successful passive leader where you have the expertise and the seniority of people that are able to really conduct the responsibilities and start to finish complete projects without you really needing a lot of input and you're being there more as an advisor. So I think for me, that's something what I really spend a lot of time learning and training myself to do is to identify what a leader actually means to me in this particular role, what's needed, understanding what style I am and where there might be conflict with my style with this particular group or this particular need, from a leadership standpoint, and identifying, what areas and opportunities I have to improve. So I think realistically, you look at all like the best leaders just, in nutrition, but also outside of nutrition in all different fields. And I think a lot of people are very much like self-starters and they spend a lot of their own time on like growth mindset and understanding how to improve their self as both people as well as like professionally. So both personally and professionally. So I think I spend a lot of time just listening to like inspirational TED Talks and doing like little leadership articles and reading about leadership styles and how things work and don't work. I do enjoy sometimes from time to time taking like different validated tests that help show leadership skills and styles and like how I can conflict versus stay in sync with other people. And that helps me kind of remind myself, okay, like that makes sense why I had this conflict, or that makes sense why I felt a little bit of like tension in this meeting, just to help understand where there was opportunity. And honestly, just read a lot of books. Like there's so many incredible, inspiring books out there that give perception of people's experience. So find people that you think are successful and learn about them. Like, how did they get there? What are the skills that they have that you want to develop? So I think, not just in nutrition, I would argue looking outside of nutrition can be extremely helpful, looking at successful business owners, looking at successful entrepreneurs, looking at successful researchers or professionals, not just in the nutrition world, to help develop skills that you may not have directly had the experience in the nutrition world to get.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you have that because the impression I got from what you just shared is flexibility and context depending on how you are as a leader, like who you are as a leader, like everyone has different personality traits. But when it comes to leadership, I'm glad that you added that light of it depends on who it is that you're leading, the type of leader that you are. Because you hear a lot of because I've heard about all the different leadership style traits, like, oh, are you like passiveness or very active, like, and I think there's even 9 or more types of leadership styles, but I'm glad that you added that layer of, yeah, but it may change depending on who it is that you're leading and the people that you're working with. And I like how you showed that balance of, knowledge acquisition, like learning from people, kind of reading books, doing articles, learning more about yourself, but then also applying it, like being in those leadership roles, kind of experiencing interacting with different people so that you can see what could rub you the wrong way and then learn more about yourself. So that constant give and take of interacting with people, seeing how that works, but then still learning as you go. So I think that's a really healthy balance. And I'm glad that you've experienced within your career that natural progression of going from like local volunteering to now these national levels of involvement. And I think it's not only benefiting the profession, but a lot of dietitians do have that personal motivation and that personal drive to want to be part of the profession. And so I'm really glad that you've been able to learn from it and also give us advice on ways that we can also learn from it. And I like what we've talked about too when it comes to like credentials or degrees and finding ways to have RDs have a greater spot and place in the field. Um, so when it comes to your clinical experience and how you've probably, I'm sure, worked with a lot of allied healthcare professionals, like interdisciplinary teams, or just interacting with a lot of people outside of nutrition, have you been in spaces too that have involved like the need to advocate for RDs, or when it comes to just overall advocating for the dietetics profession? Because I think especially with the master's degree requirement and how, like with what you mentioned, learning about people outside of the nutrition field, it's because dietitians are involved. Like, we can be researchers, we can be entrepreneurs, we can be in all of these different spaces, but that requires that need to advocate for ourselves in those spaces. And so, have you been in those types of situations in your position as needing to advocate for RDs, or just overall any advice you would have when it comes to advocating for dietitians in our profession?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think realistically, every single day is an opportunity to advocate for as a clinician and as a dietitian or whatever you're doing. I'm a strong believer you aren't at the table, you're lost. So you always need to have a seat at the table of all of these different, meetings and opportunities. And even if it's something I don't agree with, I still sign up to go, because I want to hear and I want to learn perceptions of other people and see how I can have a better space at the table. And if I'm left off, I ask if I can still attend. And I think sometimes there's like the fear of asking to be present in our profession. And I think it's incredibly important that we continue to advocate. And I encourage, everyone in my circle and who has probably worked with me probably would say the same thing, that I'm not afraid to kind of have a voice, and do it in a way where we can only inspire and support each other as a profession, as a team, if you will, to kind of have a seat at the table. I think that involves people to sometimes step out of their comfort zone. So if you're feeling like you're always like comfortable at your job or you're just kind of getting by, I encourage you to like evaluate and see, how could I get uncomfortable? Like, what are things that could actually spark up discomfort in my position to where I can grow and I can um, move into a place where I have a stronger seat at the table and I have a stronger voice. So if you're like, I'm just charting all day and nobody listens to me, um, see what can be done about that. Like, there's always a way to kind of um, get a stronger seat at the table. You just sometimes have to get creative with the process of how you do it. And so I've done a lot of, I think, advocacy, kind of at all levels, at an institutional level, at a national level, just peer to peer with friends, with old students who have graduated, who have called me just looking for advice at their job. So I think just every day it's important to be an advocate in some way, shape, or form. I'm newly getting into some of like the policy work and helping with our California licensure. So we have a new task force we're reigniting as of last year, thanks to the president of California Academy, who's been really helpful in that. So I think it's just like, if you're not happy with something in your field or you're not happy with something that is touching you at work, identify, first off, like why, like what is it about that that's not working for you? And then identify like different strategies or roadmaps to help improve the process to get you in a better fit or a better zone, that could improve your own career path, but as well as your like professional um, attention that you put in. I also think mentorship is incredibly important. So, as much as we sometimes feel like, oh my gosh, it's another thing I have to do to like work with somebody or support someone. I love my role. I teach at University of Pacific, the Future Education Model. It's a graduate nutrition program. And I'm busy. Like, I work multiple jobs. I sit in multiple leadership roles, and a lot of people are like, why do you work, so many different things and do so many different things? But I think each one like brings value, in working with students is a way to advocate for them to be the best dietitians and the best, get the best out of their career that they can very early on. So I highly encourage, if you don't precept and you're a dietitian, or if you're a student, like look around and look for mentorship, or look if you can be a mentor to somebody, because that is a way to advocate, indirectly and directly to the field and to that individual to help them grow too. Um, I think what also can be really important is learning scope of practice in helping people when you are working with them or kind of advocating for your team, understanding your own scope of practice, whether that's at a student level, an entry level, a advanced level, so that way people can build off that, because not all dietitians are created equal. So when you're working with a team, and you are somebody, let's say, that's at like more of a senior level as a clinician on your team, you really want to help advocate and support and grow and mentor some of those, newer to the field dietitians that you work with, if they have interest, to help grow their skills, because in a sense you're advocating that your team is only getting stronger in the scope of practice of what they're able to do from an individual standpoint only grows. So I think there's advocacy comes not just in like public policy form, but it also comes in a form of mentorship. It comes in a form of teaching at an academic setting. It comes in a form of having a seat at the table when you're the only dietitian among a lot of executives, and just reminding people of the role and the value of a dietitian in getting people to develop their own knowledge and skill sets to the place that they want to go. So like advocacy is such a broad bucket, but it's really neat when you get empowered to use it and to do it every day in your practice.
Yeah, and I love how you highlighted all the different ways that advocacy shows up in dietetics and how it's again not just in policy, it's in all the different relationships that it kind of springs up where you don't ex you ex I feel like the perception that advocacy has is that you're just shouting with a megaphone and then just hoping that someone will listen.
Right.
But you showed really nicely how advocacy is in interpersonal relationships. It's in mentorship. It's in if you're teaching someone. It could be with coworkers. It could be with this large group of super intimidating people, but you're still the one to take a step and like kind of put yourself in. Because it's very much like again, you think of advocacy as the shouting thing, hoping someone listens, but it's really actually like a relationship driven form of communicating, getting the word out, and really like I'm glad that you showed that perspective of it because I think that also makes it more attainable. Like I think that makes it more approachable for students, especially when it comes to mentorship. Like we have an RD2BE mentorship program that happens twice a year. There's RD mentor, there's a bunch of mentorship resources out there. And I think also your professors can be mentors, your DPD director, or they can connect you to someone because Carl, who's founded RD2BE, he always says, and I truly believe it's like one of like the most accurate things is that the dietetics profession is such a giving profession. And I think really leaning into that and using that to your advantage as a student is really helpful because when you have mentorship earlier on, you have these cheerleaders now that are cheering you on and even advocating for you and kind of building that self-confidence of, no, I can do it. I can do this. And maybe it's not so bad, like there's just those types of things. Um,
Yeah.
and it's one reason too why we've started talking about salary on this podcast with how do you advocate for yourself? How do you advocate for better pay? How do we actually have our scope recognized and these credentials recognized so that we can get higher pay to where the raises typically won't come, just passively. It kind of comes with doing a self assessment of am I happy with my current salary? Like, am I happy in my current position? And what can I do about it? And how every day is an opportunity to do the same. So, all that to say, I think you brought up really great details and nuances to advocacy that I think a lot of students can at least get some new insights or new ways to think about it. Um, and oh yeah, sorry, but
Oh no, I was saying good. I'm glad.
no, certainly. And I think one thing too, when it comes to advocacy or just kind of self-confidence, is also those abilities to step out of your comfort zone, like with what you mentioned, and maybe making those tough decisions. Like part of advocating for yourself is being like, no, I am like good enough to pursue a higher education, or I am good enough to have a seat at this table or pursue this extra credential to really make myself stand out and carve out my niche. And so you have many career achievements with like leadership roles, again, being in so many different positions, mentoring people, teaching people, and truly kind of spreading your branches to really making an impact with the profession. And I feel like a lot of that had to come with being thoughtful and strategic, where it's like, okay, I'm going to add this thing to my plate. Is it worth my time? Should I invest in this? What am I getting out of it versus what am I putting in? Especially with balancing all the things that you do. And so when it comes to people who also may be presented with making those types of thoughtful or strategic decisions, either for their personal growth or their professional growth, do you have any guidance that students may experience or face when it comes to making those types of pivotal or transformative career choices, whether that's joining a DPG, getting involved with the academy, choosing where they're going to do their graduate degree, just any advice on those types of decisions?
Yeah, I mean, I think always ask yourself like why? Like what am I doing? What are my values right now? What actually right now matters to me? Like what am I trying to do with this? I think is a good first question and direction. I also think identifying that there's not a perfect path. I think I was taught, by a lot of like my instructors and very early on in my career, there's like a path that works for dietitians. And I think that's probably not the case in many ways. And I think that's probably taught a lot less now since we have so many different opportunities for dietitians. but I encourage you to focus on direction over perfection. So you don't feel like, hey, I didn't achieve this, like I didn't do this for 1 year, or I didn't do this after I graduated, or I didn't accomplish this. So really think about focusing on your direction rather than this like perfect path experience that you're hoping to have. Um, I think it's also really great to test things out a little bit before you fully commit to them. So if there's an opportunity to do like on the job shadowing, or really, getting exposed, if you're in your internship or your rotations and you get choice, like make sure you have a really diverse offering that you get experience at, to really get a better understanding of what different things actually look like. Um, uh, be careful too of some of like the sunk cost bias, where sometimes um, we get really attached to the fact that we've spent costs on something, or we've committed to something and we've put time and energy and effort into it, and we don't want to leave it. So feeling like that commitment of, oh no, like I've already spent X amount of weeks on this project and I've already invested time and energy and finances into this, like I don't want to leave it now. So when you're in that like pivotal kind of transition phase, like allow yourself to say, hey, this doesn't serve me right now. This purpose I thought it did is not working, and I need to close the chapter on this for the time being. You might revisit it, but don't be afraid to separate yourself and say, hey, this like doesn't serve my purpose right now anymore. Um, and also not feeling fearful, like you have to jump in. Don't let things like your age or any factors about yourself or your knowledge, I guess your knowledge you should consider, but certain, biases we may have about ourselves too, if we're lacking self-confidence, if we're lacking certain areas of knowledge, like finding those opportunities to say, well, how do I improve that, or how do I grow that, or how do I improve my confidence? But don't let things like your age, or, some of the things that you can't change, be a driving factor for saying, oh, I'm not experienced enough, or I'm not old enough to take this role on or apply for this. Like, toss your name in the hat. I remember when I was like very young, I was just like signing up for things and like putting my applications in, and I got denied a lot. And I mean, understandably, like I was applying for things I'm probably not qualified for, but I just thought, hey, like I'll create this like fun promotional video and put my name in the hat, and like you just get the denials. And that's okay. Like that, in many ways made it easier when I was actually ready to be applying for some of these things and had the proper experience and expertise to feel a lot more confident with my application. I've gone through the process. And so don't confuse fear with being a bad fit. So I think that's kind of something that I would definitely consider, especially as like a new practitioner or a student when you're in transition phases.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, not seeing it, I think being really critical with yourself as far as, okay, is this fear or is this like actual irrational concern? Because there are certain things, like with what you mentioned, where it's like, yeah, knowledge is something. Like if you only have a high school diploma, you shouldn't be applying for doctoral programs. Like it's that type of thing. But I think and also being aware of like, okay, what things can I change or can I work on versus what things am I just saying that I am not competent for to hold me back. And I think one potential, like not potential, but one skill that's really important just in any role that you are as a dietitian is critical thinking. And that was something that you did talk about beforehand about wanting to really emphasize to students, especially when it comes to wanting to expand our roles, to expand our recognition. And I mean, critical thinking is also important in advocacy because you mentioned how sometimes you have to be creative with ways to advocate for yourself. And so I really did want to take some time to also talk about like critical thinking, its role. You've seen it a lot in clinical settings. I'm sure you've seen it a lot in your leadership experiences with having to think differently, look at things at a different angle. And while critical thinking is just that buzzword that we've heard so many times, can you explain and kind of offer this floor, especially because you're a professor and you teach MNT and you teach critical thinking? Um, why is it so important? And for someone who wants to improve their critical thinking skills in the dietetics profession, just advice or direction that you would give students who want to focus on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you think about what we do as dietitians, right? Like to most of the degree, you're touching humans and people and populations. So critical thinking for me is so important, and I encourage you to think about it in the spectrum of when you're talking about individual people or populations at large, you're talking about all these different characteristics, traits, backgrounds, environments, conditions, potentially clinical history, surgical history that you have to think about. So when you read a guideline and it says you have this, if somebody has diabetes, do this, you have to take that with a grain of salt to some extent and say, okay, but how does this fit into this person? Like it's not because XYZ happened, now we offer this as a clinician. So really individualized and personalized approaches in critical thinking, I think are so, so important. And that's a skill that needs developed. Because sometimes we get nervous and we say, okay, oh my gosh, this person's on a renal, like they have a history of dialysis, renal diet. But it's really not that simple and it doesn't work for everyone. And so it goes back to, there's conflicting information out there. You go into research and you'll see a study produce this result, but a study produce this result. You talk to two different doctors and they're probably going to say different things about the same condition or the same patient, which is why it's okay to have different opinions. It's okay to have different approaches. But you have to learn how to navigate conflicting information or integrating multiple different perceptions or perspectives about different cases or different situations. And then at the end of the day, like you have to consider ethics, right? Like what are the ethical pillars of what's going on? There's a lot of ethical dilemmas that we experience as dietitians, whether it's with like autonomy or combating misinformation, or considering things like bad diets or food insecurity. Like there's so many ethics that are always woven in. And critical thinking really helps us balance out like the ethical practices the uh, with the research, with best practice, with what we should do as people, and make really practical recommendations that are going to make sense for the individual population or whatever you're doing. Um, Critical thinking also, I think, really elevates the ability to work on a team and to think through things without jumping to conclusions or without not having all the available information you should have. So it allows you to ask questions that are going to be meaningful. It allows you to synthesize information. It allows you to put together the whole picture rather than just focusing on nutrition. I wish it was that simple. When you go into practice, if all you're doing is thinking about nutrition, in my opinion, there's better ways to do it. You have to think about the whole picture of whatever you're working on, and it's not just about nutrition. That's one component, but it's not the only component.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very much, I mean, I think it translates into how everyone eats, and but not everyone is what they eat. Like you're dealing with a whole person, and you have to take that into account when making recommendations and when wanting to motivate a certain person to eat. Because one thing that I remember learning in MNT that really opened my eyes was if someone's on tube feeding or if someone's on a ventilator and they just deny the food, like that could be a sign of them just wanting to have autonomy and them finally wanting to make a decision in the care that they're getting. And that was one step in my, I feel like, critical thinking journey of it is so much more than just someone denying to eat and then being frustrated with them not wanting to eat. Like it is a person behind that that's making that conscious choice of I at least have a decision in this process. And then having that ethical balance of, yeah, it's just so many ethical considerations as far as respecting autonomy, but respecting their nourishment and like what the patient wants and then what the family wants. And it's a really important thing to learn as a student. And when it comes to someone listening who wants to help hone in on their critical thinking skills, is it something that you feel like that just comes with experience or comes with exposure, comes in classes? Like what directions would you recommend students take if they want to really hone in on this skill?
Yeah, I mean, I think just listening, sometimes just being present, like if you're working in a hospital, go to rounds, be around other people so you can hear what they're doing and how they're making decisions. I think I learned so much from not sitting in an office and actually being present in the situations that I worked in, and asking questions and asking thoughtful questions that have purpose and meaning behind them. And if there's things I didn't know, look it up. There's so many resources out there. Um, I tell my students this, it's acceptable to not know something, but it's unacceptable to have that knowledge gap for too long. So you have to make the effort and go the extra mile to actually look things up and to understand things so you can from A to Z explain it when we come back to talk about it. So if you're recommending something but you don't know why, there's a problem with that.
No, I think that's so great because school drives us to just no, 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 and not so much why. And I think when it comes to being out in the real world, it's bridging that gap. And I think a really great recommendation that you give is having students identify what that gap is. And I'm really glad that you also said, hey, it's okay to not know something, but it's your responsibility to fill that gap. And it's your responsibility to, the next time that you revisit it, you've filled that gap of knowledge. And now how are you going to apply it in the situation where you need it? Um, and I feel like that can come in classes, that can come at work. And yeah, listening and being present, like, yes, there is power to words, but there's even greater power to listening and hearing what others have to say. And the last bit of this episode that we really want to focus on, because you've talked so many great things just about good skills to have with leadership in a clinical setting, just lots of ways that students can really make the most of the dietetics profession. But for you, with where you're currently at, you've shared all of these positions that you've been in, all the things that you've been able to soak up by being a dietitian. And so when you were going through school, doing dance, doing nutrition, doing all those things, is there something or some things that you never imagined that you would be doing now that's become a key part of your career?
Yeah, I mean, first off, I never thought I'd be in clinical. Never in like a blue moon did I think I'd work in clinical. But I love clinical now, and I integrate a lot of what I did in sport nutrition when I was practicing as a sport dietitian into clinical. And I know at the beginning you mentioned I founded a new company recently, and that's been something I never thought I would actually go through with. I've always toyed with it. But it's really neat just to be able to work with seasoned professionals and people I look up to and be able to kind of run my own, business in a sense of how do I want to do things and how do I want to really make this company successful to reach the public and to reach patients and to reach the people that need it the most. Learning things like regulations and standards and some of the technology side of things. So I think it goes back to, don't let something that you don't know a lot about be the reason why you don't do it. I don't know a lot about like financial management and some of the regulations and technology integration and like running my own company, but I'm learning and I've done a lot of work on myself to like learn some of those things over the last couple of years to get things launched. So just take the leap, and there's people out there that can mentor and support you along the way, even if you're a professional. So, it's great, like while you're a student, eat it all up as much as you can. But even when you're a professional, there's still opportunities.
Yeah, and I love what you said where, hey, don't let not knowing something be the reason that you don't pursue it. Because I mean, at some point, no one knew anything as far as aspiring RDs. We didn't know a lick about nutrition. Now look at us at what we're studying and what we're knowing. And I think that's a really great also self-assessment tool that students can have where it's like, okay, when it comes to making pivotal transformative steps, it's like, am I just not wanting to do this because I don't know enough about it? Or is it like, is this something that can be filled in with a gap of once I jump in? Being able to really sink my teeth into it. And then again, tying back to mentorship. And so I really like how that experience, just with the things that you didn't imagine yourself that you'd be doing, that it's good to be flexible, to trust that process, keep an open mind, and just see what like opportunities present itself as you go through your career, because then that's when you really do get the most bang for your buck as a dietitian. So the last question that we have, just as a kind of like a call to action to aspiring RDs or people who are newly practicing RDs, you've mentioned how you've remained involved in the dietetics profession with the leadership roles that you've held. But for anyone who maybe wants to get involved or find a way to carve out their niche, kind of really become a good, uh, have a good start, a good drive in the dietetics profession from the gate, do you have any recommendations on ways that students can get involved in the profession, the ways that students can kind of set themselves up for being a successful dietitian?
Yeah, I mean, I think first off, find what's filling your cup and what's not filling your cup. And whatever's not filling your cup, look at the opportunities for what could fill your cup from that. And it may not be a job. It may be that you're doing a volunteer role, or you're doing a leadership role, or you want to do contract work in this area to build those skills or fill your cup. But honestly, at the end of the day, like, find the things that bring you joy. If you're going to work every day, or you're in a position every day where you're like, this is not fun, I'm really not enjoying this, you need to evaluate that, because there's so many ways that you can find things that can fill your cup and bring you better joy. When you are looking at getting started in things like leadership and just like getting into the field, you have to start somewhere. So start with like looking for DPGs, looking for a mentor, asking people, emailing people. I've had tons of people just email me over the years, or like LinkedIn me and be like, hey, like, what are some recommendations on this? Like, reach out to people. I 100% agree with what you said, is that we're very much a giving profession. So I think you'd be surprised how many people would respond to you. And if they don't, who cares? Like, that's okay. Find someone else. So it could be that they're busy, or they forgot. I forget sometimes, unfortunately, to respond to things too, and that's just part of it. But don't take it personally, and just keep trying. Be a sponge wherever you go. So absorb both in nutrition and outside of nutrition, so you can build skills that you may not necessarily get just from the nutrition profession. And always remind yourself too that you're going to cross paths with the same people potentially. So people that you went to school with, or people that you had jobs with. So just being really mindful that the profession is large, right? Like 113,000 or 115,000 people, but it's also small enough where you're gonna see some of the same people, especially when you get to a place where it's like leadership and advocacy, because it's a lot of the same voices sometimes that you see. So just be, respectful, be present, be a sponge, and you have to get started somewhere. So like me, like, I got denied so much when I first started, because I didn't have any experience. But start at the local level and throw your name in the hat and keep trying until somebody takes that chance on you.
Absolutely. And I think those are such great words to end on. And it kind of goes to with that advocacy of just overarching theme. And so thank you so much, Dr. Yaceczko, for not only sharing just great insights into ways that students can make the most out of being a dietitian, but great skills on leadership, ways to lean into mentorship, not getting stuck in our heads too much, ways to make good, thoughtful decisions, and really finding ways that we as individuals can help uplift the profession, like in a community-based way. So thank you again so much for taking the time with us today.
Of course. Thanks for having me.